All right. 7:35, we're going to start this meeting of the regular meeting of the school board. It is May 6th, 2021. Madam Secretary, note the roll. I note a quorum if we want to stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. We'll move on to recognitions and presentations, and although there's nothing on the agenda specifically for that, this is Teacher Appreciation Week, and I know just sending my kids to school, it's been wonderful to see all the support for our teachers. I just want to say on behalf of the board, our teachers here in District 25 are wonderful, and I think we can go up and down with every member here and say how fortunate we are to be in Arlington Heights and to have the quality staff that are taking care of our kids on a daily basis. We appreciate everything that they do day in and day out, and as a parent here, this is one of the reasons, and when I went through my appointment kind of interview, I said I came here because of this district. I grew up in this area, and District 25 was a shining light, and I moved here because of that, and the teachers were a big part of that. So thank you so much to the teachers at District 25. You're truly appreciated. I know that the last year has been a little bit up and down, but we really appreciate what you're doing for our kids. My kids come home every day and just rave about what is going on in this district. So thank you so much. With that, we'll move on to community input, and this is where I to read the script here, so I'll do my best. The opportunity to speak to the board is provided for members of the public who have a comment to make about the business of the board. The board appreciates hearing from stakeholders and values your thoughts and questions. As the board strives to make the best decisions for the district, public input can be helpful. In order for the board to reserve sufficient time to conduct its business and to operate its meeting in the spirit of civility and decorum, speakers are expected to follow the following guidelines. Address the board only at the time provided on the agenda and only after being recognized by the board president. Identify yourself and be brief. Your comments must be limited to a maximum of 3 minutes. The board may shorten this allotted time in order to conserve time to allow maximum number of people the opportunity to speak. Please be respectful and courteous, and the board requests that you do not make statements that are personally disrespectful or condescending to members of the board or staff. The board typically does not respond to comments or attempt to answer questions during the public comment period, but we do listen intently and appreciate the input from our community. So with that, we're going to start. Monica Tietz.
My name is Monica Tietz, and I'm a district parent. I have 2 kids at Olive, and I'm here to voice my disappointment with board members for not being able to step down from leadership position after a terrible year. Anisha Patel should be at least a board vice president, if not a board president. In the last election, she received the most votes, and she is a change this community needs to start healing after a year of lack of leadership or bad leadership from the board. Patting yourself on the back will not change the fact that your bad leadership put us as a community where we are today, divided like never before. I would also like to remind board members that they should work together and make decisions that are best for the community and not their egos. As board members, you were elected to make the decisions that will affect our kids' future, and not to play political games or games of power. Switching positions and not being able to step down after failure does not serve our community and our kids. Shame on you for that. Great leaders know not only how to lead, but also when to step back and let others lead. And once again, you've proven that you are not the leaders this community needs. I'm not sure if anything can be done, but if something can be done, I would like to ask the board vice president to step down and Anisha Patel to take on that position. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Monica. Karen Joseph.
Hi, Karen Joseph. I have 3 students in District 25. I'm here tonight to show support for actions the schools have been taking related to diversity, equity, and inclusion, and to express disappointment in recent actions by the board. Last week, I was here in the room. I watched the board elect your leadership for the next year. I was disappointed in the outcome for vice president as you moved Brian to that role and passed the opportunity to elect Anisha. Anisha is not only a very qualified board member, she also received more votes than any other school board candidate in the last election, showing wide community support. She's also the board member with the most DEI training and the one member we hear from consistently when it comes to DEI. I bring up DEI here because it appears that your actions as a collective board do not consistently send a message of support. Yes, you adopted the new strategic plan that includes DEI core values and goals, but that was not without a lot of questioning of definitions, confusion on the term equity, other questions about the requirements for implementing the new culturally responsive teaching and leading standards, as opposed to asking what the board can do to support all students. Comments on representing 85% of the students instead of representing 100%. No questions or concern on why lower income students are a higher percentage of those choosing a remote learning option and what can be done to support them, and I could go on. There was no misunderstanding when many of us came to show support for continuing to move forward with your DEI policy and the strategic plan. You make it clear in your lines of questioning and the actions you take in each meeting. You may make a voter comment in one meeting, but then you confirm the opposite in the actions you take in the next meeting, in the next communication, and on each item on which you stay silent. Leadership does not always mean taking big actions, but that you are consistent in actions that exemplify the direction you want to take. Over the past several months, I'm not clear on the direction and values you have as a collective board, but I do know that last week you spoke loudly and clearly that you do not prioritize qualifications or representation, and you appear to want to hold on to the status quo. Despite this, actions are being taken at individual schools to move forward on DEI. In April, Olive and Patton hosted the One Book, One School program, featuring a biracial author who the students had a chance to meet and ask questions. The book featured a main character of color going about everyday activities. This type of representation is not only important to families of color, but for all students to see materials that reflect the larger world, a world they will grow up to live and work in, and a world that increasingly requires cross-cultural skills to be successful. I also want to recognize the Olive administration for reaching out to us to purchase a diverse collection of books to have in each classroom. We're happy to partner with the schools in the importance they place on DEI, and we ordered the books from a minority-owned bookstore. We also are recognizing that May is Asian American and Pacific Islander Heritage Month by sending resources to parents so they can engage in related activities with their families. These actions show the values and direction our schools and our community are taking. I hope you as a board will come along with us and make consistent actions on each of the next DEI opportunities that are coming your way. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Karen. Anybody else? Lana, no more blue. Oh, yes.
Melissa Kerr, on the board docs agenda, item number 13, consent agenda, will you please attach the supporting documents, the personnel report and addendum to personnel report, the treasurer's report, and invoices so the public may follow along? Thank you.
Thank you.
I have some electronic.
Okay.
I have 3 comments submitted through the electronic process this time from Miranda Hobbs. Thank you for recognizing that vote totals are disproportionately driven by the amount of votes purchased by ATA and IEA. Your rejection of Anisha's bid for vice president gave me confidence that our board is not controlled by the teachers union, even though several of its members clearly are. Submitted by Jacqueline Leppert. Disappointment is not a strong enough word to describe what I feel about the board's actions, showing their lack of commitment and sincerity to the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Initiative. The complete dismissal of Anisha as a nominee for vice president has shown where the board of mostly white men stands. She has shown more commitment to serving the community on the board and to serving the community in a multitude of ways beyond her role as a school board member than anyone else. She has significantly, more votes than any other candidate. She is a doctoral student and experienced educator with a master's degree. Clearly, all these make her a highly qualified candidate to be the vice president of the school board. Microaggressions such as the show a lack of commitment to making real changes and a commitment to keeping things the status quo. It was a great misstep of moving forward and shows a complete lack of servant leadership by the other board members. The community wants more leadership by example. The young women and children of color in our community deserve a better representation of leadership. Thank you, Greg, for nominating Anisha and trying to bring the change many of us voted for. And from Michelle Hilgart, I wanted to express my sincere disappointment at the board's decision to overlook Anisha Patel as vice president of the board. After a rocky year, the community overwhelmingly voted Anisha back into her position, acknowledging her role and perspective throughout the difficult decisions made this past year. In fact, Anisha received more votes in this past election than any other candidate. Further, this decision is glaringly incongruous with the community's clear support for diversity, equity, and inclusion, and the board's recent recommitment to this initiative. To have overlooked these factors demonstrates a clear disregard for voice of your constituents and leaves us all to question what factors drove your votes. Those were the only comments submitted electronically at this time.
All right. No more blue slips or comments. We'll move on. Communications to board members, and starting a new chapter, NSSEO with Gina Faso. And I know this is fresh off of last night. What you got, Gina?
So I have to offer that, first of all, I did not expect that the reward and the emotion of stepping into Erin's shoes was going to be so great. And last night was absolutely amazing. So there was lots of recognition, the things that are important and pertinent to our group. Out of 3 Shining Stars awarded last night, 2 of them came out of District 25. The first one was out of our Greenbrier Elementary School, and the second one was out of our South Middle School. And to watch what these children have achieved, and it was all recorded and all their videos, and what they've accomplished is all there. I have pages that I could read. But suffice it to say that I was beyond overwhelmed. I was beyond impressed. And their accomplishments will really make you feel like you haven't done enough. It really will, to watch what these children have done. So it was very exciting, and I'm looking forward to continuing. I will also offer that as a district, I chose to abstain through the voting simply because I didn't feel I came from an educated perspective. So if you do watch it, don't be surprised by that. That was just a personal position because even though I read it, I didn't necessarily have enough time to ask questions.
Okay, thank you, Gina. It sounds like as the alternate to NSSEO, I probably won't be, okay, so. But no, it's the passion, and it's wonderful there just to see what they're doing. So thank you for continuing that with the board here at 25. Next up, IASB. Does anybody have any input on that?
Yeah. Yes, Mr. President. It was really meaningful to attend a half-day summit today, the WELLS Summit, Women in Education, Leading and Learning. So I joined 300 women today for a half-day summit that ISB co-sponsored. So I thank Lana for getting me into that workshop. And so it was great to be with the superintendent, school board members across the state of Illinois. So that was wonderful. And the thing that struck me was as far as statistics go, is that 25% of women, the superintendency are women, right? So there's kind of a void there. But as far as elected boards go, 50% of the nation's school board members are women. And that's out of other elected boards. Women have the highest representation on school boards, but we don't see this representation as far as president, vice president. And I think the number one step as far as diversity equity goes is an awareness piece. So on our own District 25 board, in the last 25 years, we've only had one board president who was a woman. So in the last 25 years. And for vice president, the last 25 years, District 25 has had 2 women. And in the 41 years since the records show that there's only been 11 presidents who are women. So I think a change always happens with awareness, and for us to kind of acknowledge kind of our history so we can move forward. So the workshop definitely was very helpful in hearing other women and the resilience that they lead with as women educators. So it was a worthwhile conference. Thank you.
Thank you, Anisha. Anything further for IASB? All right. AdRed, Stacy.
There has not been an AdRed meeting since our last board meeting, but I understand there may be some questions about some legislation from the board.
Yeah, we did have a question posed. Yeah, Rich?
Yeah, so this came about for House Bill 2789 that is now in Senate. Yeah, I don't know, Stacey, if you know a little bit about it or had a chance to look at it.
I did. I know AdRed is at the table
Okay.
for negotiating on that bill. I know that it did pass out of the House and is in Senate. We did hear from AdRed that they are hoping on moving something forward in relation to this bill by the end of May. And they will keep us posted on that. The Illinois Department of Public Health and ISBE have filed an opposition to the bill, as well as a number of other organizations. So we're waiting to see at this point where it goes from here.
Yeah, so just to maybe help with the board, so what this proposal is, and it's been moving very quickly because it was first adopted, or first reading was in March, and it moved through the process very, very quickly. But what this would effectively do is require the Illinois Public Department of Health to really mandate metrics for the entire state of what schools should be doing, whether they be in school, remote, in a hybrid manner. And it's funny that they say that the Illinois Public Department of Health should do this, and the Illinois Public Department of Health is saying, no, we shouldn't be doing this. As well as the Chicago Public Schools came out publicly to oppose this bill because of what it means. It now takes away local jurisdiction. And we've had comments about it and saying, wait a minute, we're being judged, here we are in North Cook, and we're being judged the same way as someone in Marengo, where the environment is completely different and things of that nature. So I think it's imperative that we, the public, or we, the board, communicate with our legislators to say, where we stand on this particular piece, because it's just daunting that we'd now let, again, seeing the activities of this past year and the changes and all those things potentially impact us going forward. Now, the one other thing, maybe on a positive note, it does mandate that the IPDH put COVID testing in all the schools. So that is maybe, a positive manner. And, I want to thank our administration because we're already doing that. We're months ahead of where even, normal thought process is at this point. So.
And I'll just add for the board's perspective, of course, there are always people on both sides of the bill, and those that support the bill. There are, again, some school boards that support it, some administrators that support it. From the viewpoint of none of us are health experts, and as we all know, the struggles every school district had with deciding what metrics and when and why. So that was the original intent of the bill, was to say, let's have the medical personnel determine. But Rich is right that it also then has that concern of taking away local control. And as Rich referenced, it's moving quickly. Things go fast and slow. through the House and the Senate. Yesterday, we were told that the supporter, the writer of the bill, expected it to not be called this session at all because it needed further communication. But then this afternoon, we got an update that they believe now they're going to try to move it so it's approved by the end of May. So those things can go fast, slow. There's really no predicting on when it stops and when it goes. But if that is something that people have an interest in, that would be something to contact your legislator about.
Maybe just to add to that, to what Lori said. So yes, you're right, at least who have filed publicly. So 86 groups have filed opposition to this particular bill, and only 4 have filed support, 2 of which being unions. So again, it's a democracy. We have fair representation, so please contact your legislators, whichever way you stand on that.
All right, thank you, Stacy. Thanks for bringing that up, and Dr. Bine for adding to that. I think we all chose to serve on this board because we wanted to serve our local community and do what's best for our kids. So hopefully, you know, there's some solution that we can all work together to do what's best in our local community and what's best for our kids. So, but I think hopefully things work out for everyone and keep us informed on how this goes. Thank you. Next up is me. We are going to talk about board governance framework, and we pick a topic each month from our blue binder. I think this month I'm going to talk about the board meeting agenda. We might see something different. I know we were all kind of informed on a different method that we are going to be voting, but I'll read this paragraph and then I'll kind of explain what we're going to be doing so the public understands. The board agenda is an expression of what board understands its work to be and how it intends to pursue that work. Typically, the agenda is a cooperative effort of the board president and superintendent. All board members are invited to submit suggestions for agenda items. Periodically, the entire board will consider important topics or agenda items for consideration in the following months. An anticipated length of discussion will be listed besides each agenda item. This is for planning purposes only. The board will use this as a guide when discussing each topic. So we did add a few months back the future topics a portion of our agenda. And then tonight, we're going to start a new process where we're going to do more of a roll call vote. And Lana is so generous to kind of facilitate that when we vote. Rather than going from left to right or right to left, we're going to start it at positions that sort of rotate. So no one is put on the spot. Whether, Greg, you would have been, historically put on the spot to vote every first time. And that's, we kind of decided that that's probably not the most fair to have that spotlight on the people. So this moving forward, it's gonna start each vote with a different person. That way, everyone can have their input and not feel that they are influenced one way or the other. So I think it's a more a fair process. So that's the reason I chose that one, and that's moving forward. Hopefully that this will benefit the board in a positive way. Next up, we have communications to board members, and first up is PTA, and Liz Neerman, I understand she's not able to make it today. So next up, we'll have the ABC 25 Foundation, Ann Poyer. No, all right, and then the ATA, Kelly Drevelin.
Good evening. Well, it looks like we're back to normal. Not many people are here. So that's a good sign, right? First, I want to thank the PTA for all the spreads and the taco trucks and all the balloons and everything like that all of the elementary and middle schools are receiving. No, well, Patton's getting theirs on Friday. Well, that's okay. But anyway, all the great things. We've had lots of spread in our lounges, and it's been wonderful. So the PTA has been great to us, and we really appreciate that. All right, so I have with me your new ATA Executive Board. Myself and the rest of my executive board are not stepping down. We were supposed to be, our term limits were up last year, but we never got to that local election last March because of COVID. And because of COVID, we decided that we would go ahead and stay on one more year. And here we are. We're at the end, right? There's light at the end of the tunnel, and May is here, and June 11th is right around the corner here. So I'm going to introduce to you our new executive board. They will take their position in their roles starting in June after the school year is over. All right, I'm going to start with Kate Reno. She is a physical education teacher at Thomas Middle School, and she's going to be our rights and responsibility. Then we have Alyssa Maloney. She is our art teacher from Patton, and she's going to be our ATA secretary. We have Joe Kim. He is he's a math teacher at Thomas Middle School. He's going to be our treasurer. To my right, we have Casey Whitaker, a music teacher at Patton, and he's going to be the vice president. And the one and only Allison Berg, she's stepping up to the plate. She's fourth grade teacher at Windsor, and we're really excited for this new board. They're going to be able to move us forward, start that healing process in the fall that we're all looking forward to, I know, build back those relationships in that positive way. I just want to say it's been an honor to be in this position for the past 6 or 7 years. I can't even remember how long it's been. 7 years, right, because we came in together, Dr. Bine, for 7 years. I love all of our teachers. We have great teachers, and I agree with you, Scott, that our teachers are wonderful here. No matter what comes their way, they all persevere, and we've made it. And it's because of them and us and all together. So thank you very much for allowing me to speak at your board meetings. But this is my farewell, my sign off. So thank you very much.
Thank you. And we look forward to working with the new board and having you come up and tell us all the great things that the kids are doing, and have the passion that Kelly with the videos and all that. I don't know, that's if you're tech savvy like that, but we're looking forward to it. Yeah. All right. We'll move on to student learning, student services have nothing, but we'll move on to business and finance and to the SR funding plan. And that's going to be Becky Fitzpatrick. And I see, Becky, you got your seat, and whenever you're ready.
Yes, this has been a mass joint effort. As the board is aware, over the past 12 months, and even more specifically over probably the last 2 months, the federal government has passed a number of funding opportunities for schools to help deal with the impact of the COVID pandemic, and trying to plan and figure out how to have the biggest impact for the buck. Takes a lot of input from everyone throughout the district. So we wanted to start out tonight just briefly running through the various federal funds that we currently get, that we consider our annual funding sources, and remind the board what those are used for, and then move into our stimulus funds, which are the one-time type of federal programs that have been recently passed. So in terms of our annual funds, in general, each of them, we start out in the spring submitting a grant application for how we intend to spend the funds. Each one of these grants has very specific types of expenditures that are appropriate use of the funds. The funds are, we can obligate the funds as soon as a grant is submitted, and typically they run from July 1 to June 30th, similar to our fiscal year, except for Title III, runs from September 1 to August 31st. And I have no explanation then other than just to make life less difficult. When we look at how to spend these funds, again, they are annual. We look at sustainability, making sure we can continue to fund the activities out of those grant funds on an annual basis. It is important to note that anytime we pay a certified, meaning TRS staff member out of federal funds, there is an automatic additional 10.41% currently. It moves to 10.31% next year. Of their salary, we have to pay to TRS. The annual needs we can address and fund like a salaried position that continues year after year, or we can come up with new needs, identify new needs every year. These funds have to go to support new costs. We have to meet what's called maintenance of effort on these, meaning you can't take a current expense and supplant grant funds to cover that, because they look at how much you spent previous year on that type of expenditure and make sure you spend at least that much or more going into the future. So for Title I, those funds are dedicated to be used for helping our disadvantaged and at-risk student populations. The allocations are formula-based, determined by our free and reduced lunch percentage counts and our low-income students. The funds are divided equally among our qualifying schools based on their numbers of free and reduced and low-income students. There is a very detailed calculation. Oh, sorry. I'm flipping on my screen and not on the board because I don't have my glasses on that far. So for Title I, there's a very detailed, complex grant application where we fill in a lot of our cost data, our enrollment data, and the grant basically then tells us which of our schools are eligible for Title I and how we have to prioritize them. When we first started with Title I, we funded only the middle school level, but now some of our elementaries have superseded Thomas Middle School in qualifying first for Title I. So we currently fund out of Title I intervention positions at South Middle School and at Windsor Elementary School. Our current allocation is just over $200,000. However, we do have carryover funds from the prior year for materials that we did not buy as a result of COVID hitting us and not being able to get everything in place that we intended to last year. Title I does have a what's called a non-public share or proportionate share, which means there is a formulaic determination of how much we have to allow our parochial schools that are within our district boundaries, what portion of those funds they get to allocate, they get to access. Title II is a grant fund specifically intended for the, Title II is specifically for the purpose of professional development, providing activities to strengthen the quality and effectiveness of our teachers and staff. And again, also Title II does have a non-public share. Our parochial schools at this point, there is a meeting with them annually where representatives from the Department of Student Learning and the Department of Special Ed meet with them to determine whether or not they plan to participate in each of these federal funds. They don't typically participate in Title I because, again, they don't typically serve the low-income student population. However, they do, most of them, if not all of them, participate in Title II because it's for staff development and helping teachers with their craft. So with Title II, out of our $72,000 annual allocation or for this year, the non-public share is $13,765. And then the reason our PD budget is higher is because we had carryover from the prior year. Title III is grant funds that are specifically required to be spent to support our English learners, meet their English language proficiency, and meet state academic standards. And again, there is a required non-public share in Title III. Our annual allocation is about $50,000, and again, we have carryover from the prior year. This grant is the one we use to fund the transportation cost for our EL program in the summer. We have done that historically for years. We also do provide some tutoring and classroom materials and technology specific to that EL student population in those classrooms. And then Title IV, we don't get every year. It seems we get it one year and then we don't, and then maybe we get it for 2 years. And those funds are able to provide student support and academic enrichment. It's not a large grant, it's about $15,000. You can see the purposes available to spend, to support activities out of this grant. And again, you can see we use it for PD and intervention and a little bit of technology. And with that, I'm going to let Becky talk about the ESSER funds.
So different from the funds, the grant funding that Stacy talked about, what I'm going to talk about are the stimulus funds. So these are one-time funding sources. Commonly referred to, many of you have probably heard of ESSER funds, and so we'll go into those in a little bit. But overall, this was an opportunity for some funding to prevent and prepare for and respond to the COVID pandemic. And depending on the grant we're talking about, these funds must be spent either by September 30th of 2023 or September 30th of 2024. So these will suffice for a few years now. In terms of District 25, some considerations we've given in terms of how we look to expend these funds. Sustainability, again, these funds are time limited, 2 to 3 years. We needed to take into consideration some staffing challenges that I know we've talked about in other board meetings. We also wanted to prioritize some systemic changes to better serve all of our students, so hopefully you'll hear that represented in some of the items that we're going to talk about in a minute. And as Stacy mentioned, again, paying certified staff from federal funds costs an additional 10.41% of salary for TRS. And also important was further investment in our high-quality District 25 staff. So it's one thing to hire new, but as has been mentioned now a couple times already in this meeting, we know we have very high-quality teachers in our district, and so we look to provide some additional supports for them to serve our students better. Some other things to take into consideration, the average cost, including federal funds TRS for certified staff member with benefits is about $72,000. And if we used all of SR3 funds, which I'll talk about in a minute, for staff, that represents 21 staff for 1 year, or 11 staff for 2 years, or 7 staff for 3 years. So just to give you an idea, we'll be talking about some larger amounts of money, but as you all know, when you start to break it down into what that translates to in terms of number of staff members, if we looked at those 3 years, we'd really be talking about 7 staff members. And another consideration is that we have had a couple opportunities to gather input from administrators and teachers on how we look to utilize these funds. So the first funding source was the CARES Act, or what has been referred to as SR1. Those funds are available through 9/30/2021. These allocations were based on student enrollment, free and reduced lunch percentage for each school, and some other informative data. School districts were strongly encouraged to explore using these funds to strengthen infrastructure for remote learning. And in this case, similar to other grants that Stacy talked about, we must provide supplemental educational services for eligible private school students. So in our case, these are funds that we've already expended. We expanded, as you know, our one-to-one technology. We were at grades 5 through 8, and we expanded that for grades K through 4, which has been a lifesaver during this school year. We also, in the tech area, provided microphones and speakers in some classrooms to assist with sound for dual modality teaching. And the non-public share for this grant ended up being just slightly over $15,000. The second round of funding, the Coronavirus Response and Relief Supplemental Appropriations Act, or SR2, these funds are available through 9/30/2023. And in this case, districts were encouraged to use the funds to mitigate learning loss through supplemental learning opportunities to close the digital divide and to address the mental health needs of our students. Here, there was no requirement for supplemental educational services for eligible private schools. And in this case, we're looking to utilize these funds, $675,000, for a few things, a few items. And this grant can be amended as we further evaluate our needs. That's pretty typical for a lot of grants. You submit a proposal, and then there are opportunities to make amendments as you continue to monitor the needs of our students. So in terms of our proposal for this grant, we are proposing to secure additional interventionists. In this case, the figure that you see up there is based on providing additional interventionists in the area of reading and math, and it would be an additional 4.0 FTE. We would then make some determinations as to where those interventionists would best serve our students based on information we're going to get back in the spring, looking at how they perform over the summer if they participate in summer school. So there's some flexibility there in terms of where to allocate those interventionists. Then I mentioned further investing in our high-quality District 25 teachers. Literacy resources is one area we're looking at. Here at a board meeting not too long ago, we talked a little bit about small group differentiated literacy instruction and the challenges of providing that to our students during this school year. So one area that we're looking at is to provide additional literacy resources to support teachers in bringing that small group literacy instruction back next year. And in this case, we're gathering input from teachers on those literacy resources. And then we've talked about funding Summer U in this upcoming Summer U season. And in addition to personnel costs, we're looking at some additional instructional materials to support instruction that aligns with our curriculum, especially where we have a number of out-of-district teachers working in our summer university program to ensure that we have space for all families that want to have their children participate. And then the last thing within SR2 that we're looking at is executive functioning professional development. And when you talk about executive functioning, it really refers to working memory, flexible thinking, and self-control. And we really see this manifest itself in school in terms of students' ability to organize themselves, to follow directions, and to manage their emotions. And so we are currently exploring some professional development opportunities for staff to support our students in that regard. And then the final stimulus fund is the American Rescue Plan, or SR3. And these funds will be available through September 30th of 24. Whoops, I'm now doing the same thing. So these will become available. These are not yet available to us, but we're already planning. These will become available on July 1st of this year. And within this fund, 20% of the total amount must be used to address learning loss. And they really define learning loss as social, emotional, and academic evidence-based interventions, and also to address disproportionate impact of COVID on underrepresented student subgroups. The remaining funds then may be used for a wide range of activities to address needs arising from the coronavirus pandemic. So these expenditures must be in some way, shape, or form related to the impact of the pandemic. And again, like SR2, there's no requirement for supplemental educational services for eligible private school students. In terms of the District 25 funding priorities, there's a number of things that you see listed there. So again, these would be things that we would anticipate using these funds for because they'll become available in July. There again is listed interventionists. This is the additional money that would be needed to round out the total amount needed for those 4.0 FTE. This in particular would fund those additional FTE positions for the years 22, 23, and 23, 24. So in other words, we'd be looking at bringing in additional 4.0 additional FTE of interventionists for the next 3 years. The first one being funded by SR2, and then the SR3 grant would fund the next 2 years. We have Summer U listed here, similar costs. We've talked about, at least in our proposal, looking to fund Summer University in 2022. However, as we've talked about, again, the grants can be amended. So in that particular case, we certainly will be taking a close look at how our students are performing and whether that continues to be a need in our community. We also have tutoring opportunities listed, and this would include personnel costs and materials. We have listed their outsourcing as needed. Our preference would be to have District 25 teachers provide that tutoring wherever possible. But we also recognize that there may come about a need where we would have to do some outsourcing of that. So we'd want to make sure we're prepared for that should we need to go in that direction. And the tutoring costs that you see there are based on, we really wanted to think about, what could this cost look like? And so just as an approximation, we looked at if, let's say, 15% of our students needed the equivalent of Tier 3 interventions. When we think about Tier 3 interventions, we really think about things like they would take place for 6 weeks, for 30 minutes, 3 times a week, or 9 hours. So that's how we came to that figure. Literacy resources is also listed here. These would be potentially some additional materials focusing on some of our subgroups, such as our English language learners and students receiving interventions. You see their unallocated funds. We think this is actually kind of an important line item in many ways, because this really kind of reflects our desire to allocate these funds in response to our students' needs. So while we may have certain ideas about what might benefit our students right now, we also want to be responsive based on the information we're getting back about how our students are growing. And so over the next few years, we'll continue to monitor these needs and adjust as necessary. And then math resources. Again, we're seeking staff input and are looking closely at building students' math fluency and flexibility, which includes developing a deeper conceptual understanding, which leads to greater transferability to unique situations. And this typically takes the form of math talks. It's as simple as it sounds. It's talking about math rather than just doing all the computation. And some of those math talks have been a little more challenging this year. So like the small group differentiated literacy experiences, we're hoping that those math talks can come back more into our instruction. And then lastly, we have listed SEL facilitator stipend and pension costs. As you might recall from a past board presentation where you approved these positions, we talked a little bit about our new SEL program ruler that we were implementing with staff this year. And in thinking about all that the implementation would require from our principals and teachers that would be on the implementation team, we really felt as though those individuals would have a considerable amount already on their plates this year. And so to make sure that hopefully we, were able to implement this program with great integrity, you were grateful enough to approve these SEL facilitator positions. But we really do feel as though that need came about because of our implementation during this pandemic. And I just met with SEL facilitators this afternoon, and they're excited about their work with staff this year and the upcoming work with students next year. And so that rounds out our stimulus funds.
And just as a side note, both SR2 and SR3, even though we're applying for them now and in July, the grants are retroactive back to the beginning of COVID, to March of 2020. And can be used to actually cover PPE and all kinds of the costs we incurred as related to COVID. We did make a conscious decision at this point not to do that because we have filed a significant number of claims through FEMA for a lot of the PPE that we had to purchase, and I'm in the process of applying for FEMA funds to cover the contact tracers, and I think I signed off today on approval to get reimbursed for the cost of our nurses doing the testing at the clinic at Thomas after hours, as well as being at the vaccination clinic. So you can't double dip into federal pots of money. So since we're hoping to get some of those claims reimbursed out of the FEMA money, we chose not to build much of that into these funds, and also so that these funds are available to be directly servicing students as much as we can.
Yeah, thank you. And thank you for working collaboratively to best allocate this money. That's good. Any questions, comments?
Mr. President, go ahead.
Britt?
Mr. President?
Let's go,
Can
Dina.
Can I just get a point of clarification? I have from my notes, before SR3 became available, we had said that with SR2, we were going to fund 2021 and 2022 summer U.
Right, so basically, we've just moved the following summer into SR3, so we could put some other things. When we did that with SR2, we didn't know SR3 was coming, so we just basically moved those funds in another way. Stacy?
And we wanted to build the intervention positions into SR2 because we can obligate those funds as soon as we've submitted that grant, and we can post those positions. If we have to wait till after July 1st to submit SR3 to even hire or post for intervention positions, we're going to have a harder time. I won't say it'll be easy, but we'll have a harder time trying to fill positions in July for August than we will if we can post those positions tomorrow.
Okay, thank you.
Rich, you had?
Mr. President, yes. Becky, a couple questions. Looking at the number of interventions and things of that nature, I would assume then the plan for, or the update, I think, may be coming in May on the academic progress, the achievement gaps, because we're still due that update.
Yeah, I think we had talked about June.
Okay, no, that's fine.
Yeah, right? Yeah, for sure. And that will certainly be a critical piece of information as we continue to look at how to utilize these funds.
So I guess is the way you're planning to utilize them, is that a precursor of what we should expect at that discussion?
Yeah, no, honestly, results are just coming in, so we have not pre-analyzed them to determine what we've shared with you tonight.
So this.
But I'll add to that though, right, when it comes to learning loss in the areas of reading and math, we know through best practice and through our already programs here in District 25, the best way we approach those is through reading and math interventionists and individual or small group attention.
Okay, but then based on the results, this distribution may change.
Yeah, the distribution could change, and so as we originally post for these anticipated for intervention positions, once we know the results of that map data, we'll then be able to say, okay, this interventionist is mostly needed at this school, or is mostly needed part-time at this school and part-time at another school, when we have the actual individual student numbers. So we're posting them in general at this point, and then we'll be able to allocate them when we have the results.
Okay. So then in the June update, as we've talked before, then we should be able to expect, the measures or how we would gauge the success of this investment.
Yes.
Okay. Becky, another maybe two questions real quick. Math resources, you say that's talks. And so I'm just, how do we spend $91,000 on talking? So is there something else that is maybe missing there?
Sure, it's the art and science of teaching. When you think about math talks, it's really about having students kind of explore really how they're using the numbers beyond just the algorithms. So how many different ways can you solve a problem? So it might be as simplistic as providing a visual to students and asking them to talk about it in a mathematical way. So there would be some PD involved for teachers. There would also be some materials that we would provide. Because I think as we know, for many of our students, if you were just to stand up and talk about math, that's pretty overwhelming without having it paired with visuals and extra materials.
Okay, so that's really the same thing for literally resources as well, so that if there's some professional development, there's maybe some material that goes along with that. It's not just that component. That's how that component, the way it sounds for small group, I'm like, well, we do small groups, but it's really to help teachers how to better do small groups.
Yep, and it's really the differentiation piece that's most
Okay.
critical. So
Okay.
in a classroom, having students of varying reading abilities and having direct intervention opportunities with those students that are geared to those reading levels.
Okay. And the final question, just because it maybe brought something up, and this is more toward you, Lori. Since we're looking at this related, the wait lists for Summer U for this year, have those cleared up yet, or are they
Yes,
clearing up?
there is no longer a wait list for our support courses, and related to that, in a typical summer U, we have about 550 students. This year, we have closer to 750.
Wow. Well, great job to the staff to get that. I know that was I guess it was a challenge to get a resource, to get it figured out, the logistics, everything else, so that's great.
Mr. President, I just had a comment. I'm so glad that we have these funds to kind of address the difficulty and the challenges our students have gone through and our families have gone through this past year. And so it's really good to hear as far as the learning loss being addressed, social emotional needs and so forth, so that's excellent. And so I want a quick question as far as how will we identify students so that students don't fall through the cracks as far as our underrepresented students, students with special needs, our ELL students, students with social emotional needs. I'm also thinking about the student population as far as equity goes at Ivy Hill, we have a higher percentage of students choosing remote, and if there's needs there. So I'm just wondering about the identification process so we make sure that all students' needs are met.
Yeah, that really goes to an upcoming event on May 28th. That'll be our next data day, where our schools and individual teams really sit down and talk about individual students. And when we talk about those students, we're talking about whether or not they might be a part of a certain subgroup in those discussions. We're looking at how they performed on different assessments. We're getting information from classroom teachers on how they're functioning in the classroom. And it's out of those conversations that we're making decisions about what students might benefit most from certain types of interventions. And also, it's great information for teachers just even providing within classroom support and to differentiate. So all of that information will be considered in May. We'll be then thinking ahead already to next year so that we can kind of hit the ground running with supports in place for students.
And I'll just add to that, all of our remote students, Becky's department did an exceptional job arranging for them to also go through the MAP assessment, so we have data on each of them as well.
Thank you, Dr. Fitzpatrick.
Anything else? All right, thank you. Those math talks sound like a lot like my dinner time with my son, because he loves to talk about how different ways you can do math and stuff. So I'm sure he's a prime candidate for that. He'll be looking forward to talking your ear off on that. Thank you much. Moving on, we have the third quarter budget update. And this is Stacy again.
Thank you. It's an interesting year to try to give as accurate of a budget update as I typically like to do and feel really comfortable doing. I think I'm very comfortable in saying that we will end up not spending our entire budget. We will not hit the deficit that we had budgeted for. The biggest factors right now affecting our budget where we stand today is we are behind on the revenue side in tax collections. Usually by this point, and this is through March of the school year, usually we're at about 94% of our tax collections received. We're at 82% as of March. I did look forward, since we're past April, we're at 90% as of April. If you recall, Cook County tax bills were delayed and not due till May 1st. So I do anticipate there were many paid on May 1st, but I don't have that information until we get through May. But just, it's out there that we're behind as of the third quarter. Student fees wise, we did not collect any transportation fees because we weren't providing paid ridership. Food service sales are lower because obviously we weren't servicing school lunch, and we're not doing a hot lunch program going through the line, which has reduced our sales. However, the federal funding for the food program, because Coletta has successfully implemented this amazing bag program that is funded at the summer food program level, we typically get about $300,000 a year in National School Lunch funds, total for the year. We are at $1.9 million of summer food program revenue this year because of the program she's run. So revenue in and of itself is, in that program overall, is amazing. We also got the CARES Act revenue, that $170,000 that we talked about up there. So federal fund-wise, we're way ahead of the game. Then we're way over budget because I hadn't anticipated, I think I anticipated about $500,000 in summer food program revenue. And then obviously on the local side, we have no building rental income because we weren't renting our buildings. So I think revenue-wise, again, assuming our taxes do come in May, at least another 4%, I think we'll be over budget in total on our revenues, which is a good thing. On the expense side, we're actually pretty well tracking at budget on our salary and benefit side. Our purchase service, we're ahead of our budget, but that is because we have 8 positions in the district right now that are filled with agencies, contracted agencies. We can't find staff to fill them. Otherwise, no significant obvious concerns about our expenditure side. We did, well, back in January, have conversations about limiting expenses for this year, and all the departments in all the schools, we've restricted spending for anything for this second half of the year to really only those items that are absolutely necessary to be used in classrooms this year. We're not spending our professional development budget monies because there isn't much on location. It's all webinars. So again, I do think overall we'll end up over budget on revenue and under budget on expenditures. Obviously, we do have other costs that we've made this year. Our budget did include money for some of the COVID stuff. If we get reimbursed by FEMA, that'll be amazing. No guarantee on that, but some of those other costs that the contact tracers and some of those other salaries that weren't in the budget, but yet we added this year to assist getting through COVID. So clear as mud.
Yeah, thank you. Anything from around the room? Comments, questions?
Mr. President.
Yes.
Stacy, can you refresh my memory? What's the excessive surplus in the life safety revenues on the first?
So
What's in that?
I'm glad you asked. So the revenues in the life safety fund, that was actually last year. We had reduced the 2019 levy, tax levy in the life safety fund significantly because we've paid on a lot of our life safety projects in the 10-year program we're finishing up. So I significantly reduced the levy for 2019. The spring collection of 2020, which would have been last year's collection, we didn't know the tax rates yet for the 2019 levy. So the March collection was based on the 2018 levy rates, where that levy was high. So it looks like we had much more, I didn't reallocate the property taxes across the new tax rates until I got them in May. So that life safety revenue is as of March, but by the time you get to year end, it's brought back down to match the current year rates. It just looks odd because of timing of the receipt of the taxes and being recorded at the prior year rates until we got the current year rates.
Okay.
Again, clear as mud.
Yeah, no, we've had similar conversations, just not to that degree.
Anything else? All right, thank you, Stacy. I think we got one more. Trying to ride in the wave of NSSEO. Let's talk some NSSEO budget. This is an action item.
Mr. President,
Yes, Anisha?
I recommend that the Board of Education approve the 2021-22 NSSEO budget as presented.
All right, Anisha, do we have a second? Chad, second. Do you want a presentation from Stacy or?
There's no change from what I presented last week.
All right. With that, I think we're going to start it with the new role.
Member Olejniczak?
Yes.
Member Patel?
Yes.
Member Filipek?
Yes.
Member Cherniglia?
Yes.
Member Faso?
Yes.
Member Connolly? Yes. Member Scapalato?
Yes.
All right, 7-0, the NSSEO budget passes, and we move on. Facilities and personnel planning, we have nothing. Next, we move on to the superintendent report, and this is first topic of board meeting format update. So take it away, Dr. Bine.
This is kind of a continuing conversation that we started a few meetings ago. At that time, we discussed numerous parts of the meeting format that we made decisions on, but I'm coming back to the board on a couple of topics that we carried over and for some input to move forward. So one of the things that the board asked was that we create some more informal opportunities for community or staff to come and meet with the board. And we can do that as long as we have 2 or less board members at a time. So it's not an official meeting. And so I have suggested a Saturday date each quarter, starting in the new school year, from an 8 a.m. to 10 a.m. And all of this can be changed. I was just making suggestions, where we could publicize that there would be 2 members of the board available. We could do those here at Dunton or at another school site, and people could drop in and have conversation, ask questions, share comments. So I'm really just kind of checking, do these dates work, times work, or did you want a different format?
Yeah, anything? Anisha, I see you're
I
lit up.
was just going to say, Dr. Bine, thank you for arranging those dates and times. It's a great idea, and definitely I'm for it. I was wondering, just kind of take into consideration families and soccer games that happen on Saturday mornings, that we possibly alternate, like do morning and then one Saturday do an afternoon. So that's just a suggestion, or different days on Saturday, because I know some people are back to back with lots of sports.
Yeah, I think if I just add, I think if we can get 2 board members that agree on a time, I think that might be something where we could work it out where this works for me and this works for you. Let's throw this together. And Dr. Bine, I know your time is valuable, but if we could get it to work with you as well, I'm sure that would be something that I think the board would work at. But I appreciate we getting this at least set somewhat in stone, so it doesn't, because it always seems like, oh yeah, we'll do it, and then it never gets done. But yeah, I think if we can have 2 board members that say, hey, this works for me, I think we could probably make that work. Does that work for you, Dr. Bine?
Sure, so maybe I could send out kind of a sign up, and whichever 2 sign up for each month, we can then decide together the day or time that works. Sure.
To that end, we've talked, or Mr. President, sorry. We've talked about, and I'm just opening this up as a thought, we've talked about doing other things with the other boards, the library board, the trustees. Would this be an opportunity to do a joint, just coffee call kind of thing? Again, keeping down to the minimum numbers that we need to.
So what you're talking about, I have reached out to all of our other organizations. They are including us in their next annual meeting. I think those occur around September. And since the village has already takes the lead in kind of getting those going, they're going to continue that and will invite us to that kind of joint board meeting. Some of them have their own kind of coffees with their boards. That would really be up to you if you wanted to invite someone from another organization to be a part of that. It just depends on, do the community members want to come and talk to various organizations or just come and talk to school board members? That's really your decision. But we will have a joint meeting at least once during the next school year with library, park district, and village.
Mr. President?
Yes, Greg.
I think this would be a great opportunity to get to those school sites as well. Someone has said it, that to travel around rather than hosting here at Dunton, and to the talk that happened earlier on that topic.
Yeah, that's a good point, because I know moving forward with the meetings here, this is our hub with everything that we're to broadcast. So that would be a good kind of middle of the road where we do have the best of both worlds, where we're hosting here, but we're also journeying out. So that's a great idea. I like that.
Great. I'll make suggestions in the sign up, and then we can finalize that together. And then the other thing that I have on here is some additional committees we had talked about. One is the Diversity Advisory Team. I do plan to restart the Diversity Advisory Team that we had done in a previous year. I've lost track of what years are now. And you remember for me, that was an amazing experience of people from the community coming together and giving us their viewpoints of their experiences in District 25. We ended up with that group, we were taking parents and administrators together to a diversity, equity, and inclusion program out of Harvard University right when COVID hit, and that got canceled, and we have not regathered since then. So while diversity, equity, and inclusion is an integrated part of our strategic plan and will be addressed through those goals, I also want to restart that district diversity advisory team. And it would be helpful, I think, if we have a board member who would like to join us on that group. I expect that group will probably start meeting on an every other month schedule in the evenings. In the past, we did kind of a 7 to 8:30. It'd probably be something similar to accommodate parents' schedules for that. And so I'm just bringing that back to see if we want to add that to our committees that the board is starting to volunteer for, if we'd have a volunteer that would want to be a member of that.
Mr. President.
Yes, Gina.
In light of the being part of the strategic plan, I'd like to recommend that maybe the board members rotate through the meetings so that every board member has an opportunity to attend one of the diversity committee meetings.
Yeah, I'd be supporting that.
It sounds like I got a little head nods. I can hear I think we're all in support of that. That sounds like a fantastic idea.
And then the other one that I wrote, we talked a little bit about a policy committee, that there are, in some districts, a board as a policy committee, and the policy committee reviews changes to policies as kind of the first reading. It would be just a committee, and then it's brought to the whole board for a second reading and adoption. But I did add on here that our procedures seem to be working. From my impression, the board kind of likes being involved in going through the first reading and making suggestions. So we could leave it as is. Again, I think that seems to be working here, but I thought I would bring it back up in case you prefer that we create a policy committee format.
I know Chad, it really,
It's jumping out of his seat there.
yes.
No, I think you said it, this seems to be working. It is something that, time is valuable. I mentioned that, and, you miss a little, miss a lot. If it's working now, unless we have a specific issue, maybe we leave it as it is. Is there anybody else who disagrees?
Yeah, I'm just kind of thinking out loud. I like that Rich put our friend Chad on the spot here, but it'd be good, of course, we all look at it, but, and I love the diversity of thought on our board of having different perspectives and different people with different expertise. And so even if it's not a committee, that we all lean on each other when the expertise comes. So if somebody, like our friend Chad, look at it a little bit deeper, then we could kind of report back on the policy so that we have a good understanding, because we all come with different perspectives.
I think Anisha's suggesting you have the policy manual.
That was a second, right?
Yeah.
The voluntold, not a volunteer.
So that was all that I had to share in that area.
Mr. President.
Yes, Rich.
Lori, the one, I did email the board on this, but I'm wondering if we should maybe introduce another committee on technology specifically. Technology is advancing very, very rapidly, and there are things within technology that, there's certain expertise that are needed, there are certain, thoughts that are needed to view at, and it might be beneficial to have that type of committee where they can, a more focused effort on that particular piece there.
So just for the board's reference, we do have, of course, staff committees in technology. Our director of technology actually has 2 ongoing committees. One is on instructional technology, educational use of technology. The other is a hardware, software committee. So those are always ongoing. But again, if the board wants to create a different board committee for that same topic, we can definitely do that.
Or this is more of a review.
I'm sorry.
More of maybe a review, more of a, because technology is advancing so much, and I know they're on the agenda every once in a while, and, I don't want to minimize that, but maybe it's more of a structured type of timing so that we're aware of the different components and things of that nature that are happening.
So more updates?
Yeah, I think that might be beneficial.
We can do that.
All right, any more comments, concerns? I was waiting. All right. We are going to move on to the second reading of policies in the spirit of our last conversation. So that is an action item. Do we have a motion?
Yeah, Mr. President.
Yes, Anisha.
I recommend that the Board of Education approve the second reading of policies as presented.
Thanks, Anisha. Do I have a second? Chad, thank you.
And these are, have not changed from the first reading, and as Scott, I think, referenced, we're bringing these to you before the consent agenda because one of these policies for second reading is 3.92, a new policy called Administrator Benefits Plan that basically just puts in policy and, therefore very transparent to the public, all benefits that are allotted to the variety of administrator roles in the district as opposed to putting those only in those individual contracts. So again, no changes to what was shared in first reading.
All right. Any questions, comments, concerns since the last, was it a week? All right. Lana.
Member Patel?
Yes.
Member Philippek?
Yes.
Member Cherniglia?
Yes.
Member Faso?
Yes.
Member Conley?
Yes.
Member Scapalato?
Yes.
Member Oldenechek?
Yes.
All right. The motion passes 7-0. So with that, we move on now to the approval of the consent agenda items, and that's
Mr. President,
Yes, Anisha.
I recommend that the Board of Education approve those items on the consent agenda as follows. A, personnel report and addendum to personnel report. B, treasurer's report. And C, invoices.
Thank you, Anisha. Do I have a second? Second. Thank you, Gina. And then Dr. Bine, is there anything? No?
I believe that we want to highlight a couple of people that are here tonight, correct?
Do they want to vote first?
Sure.
Good
Good point.
We'll call roll. Lana, can you call the roll, please?
Member Philippek?
Yes.
Member Cherniglia?
Yes.
Member Faso?
Yes.
Member Connolly?
Yes.
Member Scapalato?
Yes.
Member Oliniechek?
Yes.
Member Patel?
All right, with that, Dr. Bine.
Thank you. Dr. K is going to introduce you to two new administrators in District
I just wanted to make sure it was official before we announce them. To me, this is like the NFL draft. In this case, we had 2 first-round draft picks. So I'd like to introduce, with the unanimous approval of the consent agenda, we have welcomed on 2 new administrators. I'd like to start at Westgate Elementary School. She will be an assistant principal and a Department of Student Services coordinator, Mrs. Allison Yoder. Come on up, Allison. Just a small token of our appreciation. We are thrilled you are joining us, and you are a first-round draft pick.
Thank you.
I warned her that she would not have to talk, so I don't want to surprise her by asking her to speak. So thank you, Allison, for being here tonight. And I also want to recognize Ann Buck, her principal, for being here as well from Westgate. Thank you. And another first-round draft pick we have, I'm really excited about her as well. She actually was at Windsor many moons ago when I was there. She was an intern as a psychologist, and she will be next year joining us as a part-time Department of Student Services coordinator. Can I please welcome up here Mrs. Lauren Hammer.
So I would like to thank the board for the opportunity. When I was here 11 years ago, so not too long ago, that was also for free, so I appreciate being a paid employee. And I look forward to being back, so thank you for the opportunity.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you. And I think we're going to have the picture where they're holding their jerseys up. Oh, thank you. And welcome. It's great to have you. It's great. Moving on to our second community input, and this is the second opportunity for the public to address the board. So if anybody wishes to address, now's the time to do so. Do we have anyone?
All right, Melissa Kerr.
Yes,
We could all practice our math skills if you put the supporting documentation on board docs for the consent agenda, so we could look at all the financial reports. And for the AdRed legislation, if you think you need health opinions, you can always beckon the community health pros to come in and speak in the public forum. And if the waters don't need to be distributed, it looks like some of them haven't been drinking. You could save them off to the side and just pick them up as you need them. That way you don't have germs going back and forth collecting the unused bottles of water. And then I had one other thing, but I forgot.
All right. Thank you, Melissa. One more.
The end of the show. This is exciting. Hi, I wanted to speak earlier, but unfortunately running behind this evening. But I'd like to say thank you to the board for allowing me to speak tonight. Now that we have gotten our students back in the classroom full time, we need to start focusing on where D25 is falling behind, and that is improving inclusion in education. I come here as one, but I am represented by hundreds of families in this district who've been clamoring for years to take our children's rights seriously. We're not going to stop until every single student in D25 has the same opportunity and that includes our special education students. For many years and very recently, parents have asked to help be included in solutions only to have our voices cut down or flat out told no. This is unacceptable as we sit with the following knowledge. 2019, the Illinois report card data showed that District 25 was 48% difference in academic performance between IEP and non-IEP students, meaning students with IEPs are performing significantly less than their peers without IEPs. I don't know about anybody else, but I moved to this district for my children to get the better education. As a comparison, the state of Illinois has 34% difference in academic performance between IEPs and non-IEP students. We have a larger gap here than in Chicago. This is than the Illinois average. And that is between those two student groups. If you look at the data to drive instruction, then IEPs should be your biggest priority moving forward. And how is this acceptable to the board? And what improvements are you currently making? I would like to share the list of ideas brought to the table in the last 3 years that have not advanced at all after being shared with this administration. Special Olympics. Did you know that we are the only district in this area that does not have a chapter of Special Olympics? We looked into it, but nothing happened. Why wouldn't we want to have athletes from D25 and have our families support this community outreach of acceptance? We started a think tank that was developed 2 to 3 years ago as a committee of parents and administration to look at for guidance and support of these diverse learners. What happened to this committee, and what steps are we taking to advance the education of services provided in the district? The strategic committee action teams. Why are we waiting till the summer and fall for these to be created? Why? Let's form these now so that our students in 2021-22 school year will be ready. Mental health screenings. We have 4 weeks left of school and we have still not received those. What are we waiting for? This is not happening. How again will you affect any changes without this information? If screened, they know how many kids need therapy services, additional 504s, IEPs that will affect next year, and potentially the budgets that have been set aside. Every day, this gets worse. January 2020, school visit reports and a presentation was made that came to a halt due to COVID. Where is that documentation and what are the next steps for that? We would like a commitment from you, the district, to allow us to have IEP meetings in person to happen starting in the 2021-2022 school year. Again, we ask for this board's commitment with making improvements. We need measurable goals of how we are supporting an inclusive environment in our schools. This is robbing our children their rights to attend their home schools or be in environments where administration that doesn't have the tools to support these learners. We're asking for your commitment today, not 4 months from now. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else? You got it?
Several years ago, the library had a sponsored a State of the Village event, and it invited the taxing bodies to it. And they stopped doing it because they said they were preaching to the choir was one of the reasons. So.
All right, thank you. All right, with that, future agenda items. Does anybody have anything that we should put on?
Mr. President.
Yes, Gina.
I'd like to recommend, Dr. Bine, that we look at the plan for and I'm going to screw this up, the 2021-2022 school year, and how we're going to handle if we're going to look with the remote academy, how are we going to handle if we have quarantines, please?
All right, thank you, Gina. Anybody else? All right, hearing nothing, I'll close that down. We do have several topics I believe we have to discuss in closed session. Do I have a motion to adjourn this meeting and to go into closed session?
Mr. President?
Yes, Brian.
I move that we adjourn to closed session.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Brian. Thank you, Rich. Lana, or this is just an aye vote, so all in favor? Aye.
Aye.
All right, all opposed, no. All right, we are moved into closed session. Thank you, everybody, for coming out.